Well, that's too long of an introduction, and the very distinguished members of the panel that I will be moderating are deserve even longer introductions. I know their work. I know Nina Shea quite well, so it's a real honor to be here with them. Nina Shea I think, needs little introduction. She is a pioneer, a leader, an inspirational figure in the field of religious freedom. She's a person with tremendous passion. She's a person that I've admired for many years. I've cared about the issue of the suffering of the Christians of the Middle East for many years. As some of you know, I wrote my master's thesis on one of the books of Pope Shenouda in 1983 when I was in college, so I'm not new to this. But Nina, when I was a student, although she's a young person, was already working on these issues, was already being passionate and powerful about these issues. So thank you, Nina. Thank you for being here. Dr. Sarah Yerkes is another wonderful, wonderful person for us to have. She's a rich academic and scholarly and trying to think, political. I want to use the word political, but political has such a charged meaning in the world today. Public servant work as well at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, and adjunct professor at Georgetown, and she was in public policy at the Department of State. So both of these people are outstanding people who know the region, know the issues of religious freedom, know the suffering of the Coptic people, not as well as the Coptic Christian people do, but I think as well as any outsider can know. The panel is called Combating the Indigenous Culture of Violence and Impunity, and I'm going to leave it to our colleagues to talk more in depth. I'm just going to talk very briefly about the issue. It seems to me that the issue, when you talk about a culture of violence and impunity, the reality applies in both the region and in Egypt. In other words, the challenge we face is very similar. Egypt is a special country with a special culture, and obviously the Coptic Christian culture is such a huge part of Egypt. But the challenges when we talk about impunity and we talk about violence are similar. I call them the three iron rings of violence and impunity. All too often, when people write about Egypt or when they write about the Middle East, they conflate different things as if they were the same thing. So you'll hear people say, the Egyptian people are very tolerant people. This stuff that is happening with people being killed is unusual and rare, which is yes, but no. The reality is that what are the three iron rings? The first one, which religious minorities face and non-religious minorities face, is that there is an issue in Egypt and outside of Egypt, an issue of governance, of lack of human rights, of corruption, of unfairness, of lack of justice, which affects everyone. It's not unique to Egypt. It's a problem of governance in the third world and governance of the Middle East. So this affects everyone, and it affects, obviously, those who are most vulnerable in the society. So this general issue of misgovernance is the first iron ring of impunity and violence. The second one is the ordinary, everyday, normalized, routine discrimination, petty, and sometimes not so petty, violence, lack of civil rights inflicted by the majority against the minority. It is the daily lack of civil rights that affects Coptic Christians and other minority groups in Egypt, and the same way that happens in other countries. That is an issue similar to that issues of civil rights that we see in other places and even in the West. Injustice inflicted by those who have power against those who are weak. This is a lot of the violence that you see in Upper Egypt, which is, that type of violence, which has been deeply ingrained and become almost routine, is the second iron ring of discrimination and lack of civil rights affecting Christians, affecting Coptic Christians. But there's the third one. This is the challenge of people conflating. The third one is an intentional, funded, fabricated, and promoted campaign by Islamists and jihadists to not only defame non-Muslims, but to target them with violence, with Salafi jihadists and Ikhwanist violence that we see increasingly, especially since 1970 when President Sadat opened a certain political space and allowed Islamist groups to flourish, and we see the emergence of this type of violence occurring there. So you have these three things occurring. You have everybody suffering everywhere in the Middle East, not just Egypt. People are discriminated against, Muslim or Christian, atheist or Jewish or whatever. There's a lack of rights of all citizens in most of the Middle East, and suffering by all citizens of the Middle East. Secondly, you have the routine discrimination that occurs that is not jihadist, but is ordinary bigotry, ordinary lack of respect of the other, ordinary discrimination that has become all too often, which is part of the legacy, not just of Egypt, it's the legacy of religious minorities in much of the world, and especially in the Third World, especially in the relationship between a Muslim majority and a non-Muslim minority. And then you have, as if those two problems were not big enough, you have the new phenomenon of the last 40 years of Salafi jihadism, and of course, Ikhwanist violence. It preceded the last 40 years, but it resurged. It was a resurgence from the Sadat regime to this day.